Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar in our lunchtime series, Future Flight Friday. We're really excited to have you here today, and thank you for joining us on your lunchtime. I'm Luca Budello, and I lead on geospatial here at KTN. I'm also part of the complex system team here at KTN, where we like to explore innovation pathways that are mission-driven and look at the interconnectedness of systems and data. I will be your host for the next hour. Today in this webinar series, we're going to explore how exchange knowledge. We're going to try to exchange knowledge, gain new insight, maintain dialogue around future flight, build new connection, and find technology or services to help develop your ideas or your project. Today, we talk about dealing with complexity. Building a system for urban air mobility is inherently complex. Complex systems have always been around: cities, energy systems, transport system, socio-ecological system. But the complexity of managing a project has increased exponentially in recent years. Decisions made on sector knowledge and gut feelings have been replaced by data-driven decisions. And to handle the rapid increase of data stream coming in new forms from an ever-increasing number of sensors has become a challenge in itself. Systems that used to be separated are now interconnected and interdependent, affecting the product we design, the job we do every day, and the organization we oversee. In this webinar, we want to explore how to transform these challenges in opportunities to do things differently. Our three speakers will tackle the challenge of dealing with complexity from very different perspectives and explore how to tackle complex systems when building resilience into new projects and organizations. Each speaker will present for 10 minutes, and at the end, we will have a 20 minutes Q&A. Through the session, please enter your questions in the chat box. And if it is not an open question, please mention the person you would like your question to be answered by. My colleague Anna Hudson will monitor the chat and make sure that your questions are passed on to us. Now, let's have a look at our speakers. I'll present all of them in succession, and then we will start with the presentations. The first speaker is Rona Sheppard. Rona is the founder and chief product officer at Red Sky Management. Rona is a coach, is a business coach, and she works with top businesses to create sustainable high-performance environments. She applies theory from elite sports to organization. Rona will explore the importance of identity in dealing with complexity and how to create a culture of learning, which is key to accelerate innovation. Following, we will have Miranda Sharp. She wears many hats, but in this event, she represents the Center for Digital Build Britain, and specifically the National Digital Twin Program, for which she is the lead for the common stream. Miranda's area of interest is to enable better decision with the benefit of data and innovative business models. Miranda's talk will touch on the nature of digital twins and how they enable the management of complex systems. She will also look into how twins will be used in the future, touching on challenges and benefit, and how people who are building twins are dealing with complexity. Finally, we will have Paul Campion. Paul is the CEO of TRL, previously was the CEO of the transport systems, the transport system catapults. And he has an interest in helping companies and industry to transform through the application of new technology and innovation. Paul talks will focus on legacy systems and how a new infrastructure for the future of flight might incorporate with existing legacy transport network. He will ask the question, will this exacerbate existing transport inequalities, or can they be used to leveling up the country? Now, with no further ado, I would like to welcome on stage, on this virtual stage, our first speaker, Rona.
Thank you very much, Luca. I was listening to the introduction and thinking, geez, that's a lot to cover in 10 minutes. So we will see how we go. I'm a founder and chief performance officer at Red Sky Management. And since 2003, I've had the privilege of coaching elite athletes to make the transition from sport into business. And obviously the only thing that athletes can take with them from sport into business is their mindset, it's their attitude, it's the knowledge and understanding they have of themselves to be able to consistently present the best version of themselves to the performance that they're looking to take part in at any given time. High performance sport is effectively a race to learn. It's a race to innovate. And as humans, exploring how we do that and how we achieve sustainable high performance without it completely draining us to turn up every day and be the absolute best version of ourselves. That's a key challenge for the athletes that we have worked with. And so today I'm going to share actually one or two really simple models that help to illustrate how our athletes have worked on their mindset to be able to give the best version of themselves every day without it draining them. So the first model that I'll show you on the next slide is what sports psychologists would probably determine an immature athlete. And when I get to it, there's the mature athlete version as well. But I should say it's not like the flip of a coin. It's not you're one or the other. Like anything, it's a spectrum. So this is the extreme immature end of the spectrum, according to sports psychologists. And what this model is trying to illustrate is that this athlete's sense of themselves as a human, their sense of self-worth, their worthiness, their self-belief is completely overshadowed by their performance. And so in the mindset of this athlete, if they make a mistake, they are a mistake. If they perform badly, it's not just a poor performance, bad athlete, it becomes bad person. And it's on the flip side, it's quite positive because if they perform well, 10 foot tall, invincible, total rock star. Yeah. But that's a roller coaster ride because in sport, you win and you lose and you get selected and you get dropped and you're fit and you're injured. Just like in business, there's so many ups and downs. For this individual, for the immature athlete mindset, their emotional sense of themselves, of their self-worth is following that roller coaster up and down all the time. And typically that's why we don't see athletes remain in this mindset and make it to a level of sustainable high performance. An athlete in this mindset typically does not win multiple Grand Slams, go to multiple Olympic Games, World Championships, whatever. They might make it once, but the journey is simply too draining, too tough to be able to sustain it. The other thing you'll notice is there's not much else going on in this athlete's life. It's pretty much all about the performance. And so if they do get injured and you take away the performance, it can be a very low place. There's nothing else to focus on. They haven't developed other interests in their life. On top of that, on top of the emotional roller coaster, this individual is likely to be defensive around mistakes. And if you think about the mindset, why wouldn't they be? If I made a mistake becomes I am a mistake, then I'm going to defend. I'm going to self-justify. I'm going to tell you it was because of the referee or the pitch or the rules or the regulation or that boss over there or that person should have done. It's just too painful to really acknowledge that it might have been a personal error. Imagine a world where you can't acknowledge mistakes. You can't learn, you can't improve. And imagine the strain of living in a no mistake culture, or imagine constantly acting as if you get it. So that's the fire hose version of an immature athlete. It's all very draining. Luckily, the transformation typically happens with support from sports psychology to transition into the mature athlete, which is the next model. So on the next slide, please, Natasha. The mature athlete is all about separating that sense of self from performance. Can we move to the next slide? So you see here, first of all, that nothing impinges on self. So this athlete has taken the time to properly consider, who am I as a person? How do I like to present myself to the world? What are my values? What's important to me in terms of my conduct? How can I be proud of myself because of my approach to a problem, my approach to a performance, rather than simply using my identity as the performance? So this person has moved away from, I am an Olympic swimmer, I am an international rugby player, I am an engineer. This athlete has moved away from identities associated with the performance and has created their better, deeper understanding of their nature and their attitudes and their beliefs and their values, such that they are using those purposefully and choosing the version of themselves to present to a performance consciously. Now, this means that this kind of athlete finds learning and improving more enjoyable. Imagine a scenario where something has gone wrong with the performance. This athlete, rather than being defensive around criticism, would probably be inviting it, would be saying, yes, please come and look at this. You'll never believe the mess I made around the back. Have a look around here. I don't even know how this happened, but oh, geez, I could use some help in solving this. They would also welcome input when it's gone well. They wouldn't hesitate to call somebody in and say, look, this went brilliantly and I think I did it on purpose, but I'm not sure if I could repeat it. Can you help me to analyze it and determine, where were the elements that I should repeat? Where were the elements that were a bit of luck and perhaps actually still need some improvement further? So this individual, their ego is safe. They can explore the whole performance all the way around. They have a lot more else going on in their lives, such that they're not overly precious about that one performance. They have other areas they're trying to apply themselves, and they're getting good at understanding how to apply themselves to problems, how to improve themselves, greater awareness of their own inner strengths, their own biases, so that they can counter that with input from others. They can welcome contributions from others in a way that doesn't lessen their opinion of themselves. Gaining help and support takes nothing away from their pride in their own contribution to the performance. And they can alter their approach independently of working on the performance. So technical and emotional input to the performance can be separated and enjoyed as different aspects of improvement. They typically have the courage to be more curious and make more connections and collaborate more widely with people who are more different to themselves than the immature athlete can. So if I can go to the last slide for me, and as I say, this is a very fast, quick-fire version, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is if we think about that positive connection with others, think about working together, this is illustrating that if we have a person who has separated who they are from what they do, those two things are not overshadowing one another, then they can make conscious choices about how they contribute towards a shared goal, a goal for many people, a very complex goal perhaps. And we hear so much these days about, in the complexity of the different problems that we're trying to solve, we hear about how we need cognitive diversity. Now, how can we have cognitive diversity if we don't know our inner strengths and biases and what it is we're bringing? How can we work genuinely together rather than simply working alongside if we haven't coordinated and collaborated to be able to cover the whole problem space with our different attitudes and input? And I guess business and performance improves as a whole when each individual improves. And unless you can separate out from your performance and consider your own strengths and biases, then it's hard to exert your influence. So I guess here is an illustration of how we can begin to work together rather than merely working alongside one another. I look forward to questions in the Q&A. I'm sure there are many, because that was such a quick version of what is quite a complex concept with lots of layers. But for now, I will hand over to Miranda.
Thank you very much, Rona. And that was really interesting to listen to. Thank you very much for that. So hello, I'm Miranda Sharp. I work with the National Digital Twin Programme at the Centre for Digital Built Britain. And I'm going to talk about digital twins and how they deal with complex systems, and also the complexity that they tackle. So if we think about digital twins, often the first example that's quoted is aero engines. And you think about the number of systems that have to come together to make a successful aero engine, but also the successful number of systems that need to come together to ensure successful flight. But when we're thinking about a digital twin, and this is the challenge that was tackled in the multi-component and expensive world of aero engines, there was a two-way connection between a real and a digital object that enabled real-time interventions in the physical world to be made based on insights and better decisions made through the digital world. And we're seeing that now with the world of sensors and new technology, how we are getting a better picture of our real or physical assets through digital simulations and digital models. And that's what we're calling digital twins. Now, in this example, I've illustrated with a digital twin of a train carriage. This digital twin might help, for example, in preventative maintenance and the management of the asset of the train carriage. But you can imagine that you wouldn't be working on this very long before you realise the need to connect that digital twins with the digital twin of the signalling system and the track and perhaps the timetable, so that you get a complete picture of how to get better decisions out of it. And that's the basis on which the National Digital Twin is formed. If we connect together digital twins in repeatable ways so that we can make multiple connections and not just point-to-point connections, we can get a whole set of better outcomes, not only for just the transport sector, but also for society as a whole. And that's the vision which sits behind the National Digital Twin Programme. The National Digital Twin Programme was based on some principles, and these are the ones that we put together, which said that a digital twin needs to have purpose, trust, and function. It needs to do all three of those things, and it needs to work with some of the tensions that exist when we're tackling the issues around digital representation. So, for example, the tension that exists between security and openness. How do you make sure that people don't have access to information that they might use to malintent? But how do we make the information which is available as open as possible, so that more people can access it and achieve better outcomes for the greatest number of people? Now, we've done some research in the National Digital Twin Programme about what the way people are testing twins, and what we're discovering is that people are very good presently at managing the security and working for the public good. So we see examples such as the combination of digital assets in the underground space through the Geospatial Commission's underground asset pilots to ensure workforce safety, but also the free flowing of transportation and better roads by fewer digging of road lanes, for example. But what we're not seeing is the concept we have of federation, where people, instead of creating one massive digital twin of everything, what we want to do is connect individual data assets together so that we get a complete picture. And we're not seeing that tested at the moment, but that's one that we're looking forward to. Although you'll notice it's a great deal more complexity to the theme of this webinar. And what we're hoping is that with this sound data management, which comes with the creation of digital twins, that we see greater sense being derived from data, better decisions, and back to the better outcomes. And certainly the way that we're seeing these twins being deployed is what I said at the beginning when I had the image of the train carriage, is we are seeing people are using them to manage assets. We're seeing people collate together information about who's working on those assets, so they've got a higher degree of support and assurance around individual assets. And we're slowly seeing people graduate into the idea of systems thinking. So flight would be an example of a system which needs many assets and many processes to support it. And by linking together those different digital twins, we're seeing how it can happen better. Now, I've talked a bit in the abstract up until now, but I want to take you through a real example of where working with a whole set of digital twins or digital assets would have been better for everybody. So in this example, I'm going to talk about this particular road. You can see that this road has other roads running off it, and you can see from the dots that are on the road that it connects a number of houses and businesses and bits of social infrastructure like parks and churches and things, for example. Now, as I alluded to previously, the nice straight bit that a road comprises is not only useful for the movement of goods and people, which Paul will talk about in a minute, but also it's a good place to put pipes and wires, and they tend to get concentrated on it in order that that's the most cost-effective place to put them to give additional services to the community, such as power and connectivity. Now, and this particular road was in fact the bridge in the town of Tadcaster. And those of you who know that well will know that in a recent flood event, that bridge was swept away. And sadly, everybody knew that their pipe was on that bridge, but nobody knew that everybody's pipe was on the bridge. And as a result, there was a great deal of cost accumulated in the repairing of that bridge, and a great deal of inconvenience as those things were repaired. And what the digital twin will give us the ability to do is manage that bridge not only as a highways asset, but it will enable us to look at it from a risk and opportunities way of looking at it as an asset that supports both connectivity and power, for example. And it's the better management of those complex systems and the trade-offs that will be necessary, and the non-binary decisions that we'll be able to reach through better illustration, through digital representation of assets, that will get us towards the goal of the national digital twin. Like Rona, I've rather cantered through the principles there. There's plenty more available on the CWB website, and I look forward to your questions afterwards. Thank you very much, and I hand over now to Paul Campion.
Thank you, Miranda, and indeed thank you, Rona. Fascinating both. I'm going to take us in quite a different direction, not least because I'm not going to show you any charts. Let's talk about transport as a system of complexity. Transport underpins everything, doesn't it? One of the things that we've learned in the last year is just the huge extent to which we assume that our habitual freedom to move around is fundamental to everything about our lives. Very easy to focus on our economic lives, to think about commuting to work. But transport is involved with every part of our life. It's the ability for our children to go to school. It's the ability for us to have any sort of social life or to take part in the political life of the nation. Everything that we eat or use or wear is delivered to us or collected by us, and by the way, incorporates probably about 10% of its value on average across any piece of stuff or any service, is the embedded transport in it. It's fundamental. It's the first thing you learn when you get involved in transport. Transport is a derived demand, that people don't travel for the sake of it. They travel in order to go and see their mum, or to go to work, or to take the kids to school, or for whatever reason. And of course, that's absolutely true. For the most part, we don't just go on a journey just for the sake of it. We're doing something, even if what we're doing is smelling the flowers and enjoying the breeze on our face. We're not traveling for the sake of traveling. We're traveling for the sake of something else. But it operates the other way as well. the infrastructure that surrounds us, that enables our lives, that enables the delivery of the goods, that enables us to move around, which has been built up over hundreds and hundreds of years, in some cases literally thousands of years, determines to a large extent what our transport possibilities are. They fix the price of our goods and services. They determine where we can work, where our children can go to school, or which pub we can go to. And surely this is the heart, is it not, of many of the inequalities we see in life, the regional inequalities around the country that are addressed by the political phrase levelling up, are as much as anything to do with the economic possibilities that people have, their ability to work together in particular ways, to access certain types of work. I'm a typical example of that, as many of you may be as well. I grew up in the north of England, but when I left education, I went to London because that's where the jobs were, and that's mostly where I've stayed. And so the economic possibilities which are enabled by transport in turn determine what transport we require. Now, what this means is transport is inextricably linked to every single part of our lives. It is as complex as the rest of the world is, but we can only manage it in silos. So the government can't manage everything together, so it creates a Department of Transport. The Department of Transport can't manage all of transport at once, so it has a road department and a rail department and an air department. And the road department can't manage everything all at once, so it has Highways England to manage the strategic road network, and then it gives money to 200 and odd local authorities, and they can't manage everything, so they have contractors who deal with different parts of the problem, and so on and so on and so on. This is inevitable, necessary, and delivers a lot of benefits, by the way, because it enables us to measure and manage every part of the process appropriately. But what that means is it becomes very difficult to get the outcomes we want. We get the disbenefits of this system of systems being managed at a subsystem level. Let me give you a couple of examples. So over recent years, you'll be very aware as a user of health services that increasingly health services have been consolidated into large centres. The local hospitals, the local clinics have been closed. What that means is there are bigger units with better specialisations, more expensive equipment, higher skills, and you get better healthcare. And the health outcomes have increased through this process. What it's also mean, though, is you have to travel further on average to get to those things. So a good outcome from one system has spilled over into a less desirable outcome in an adjacent system, which is transport. By the way, the same is true of retail, isn't it? Small high street shops closing, large supermarkets opening. The problem we've really got then, as we deal with the non-negotiable challenge of climate change, and as we try and work out how to absorb and benefit from the opportunities delivered by technological change in particular, is how can we imagine our lives to be better and more sustainable? And what are the implications then that need to flow through to the transport systems? And this is fundamentally a complex problem that wrestles with the legacy that we have, which enables our current lives. And I think the stories we tell ourselves are really important here. I think it's really important that we think about this not in terms of what do we have to give up to be able to live a sustainable life, but how can we have a fulfilling and sustainable life? And we need to move forward to a better world rather than take away from the current view. So what do we need? Well, Rona and Miranda have already talked about a couple of the critical ingredients we need: leadership and the exploitation of information. But I think there's something else that we need to add to the mix. What we're talking about, particularly with technological change, is the release of constraints. Let me just give you one very obvious example. The current transport system was designed through the centuries on the basis of one fundamental constraint, which is we didn't know where stuff was. There's a couple of really vital pieces of technology that many people rely on every day. They're the bus stop and the timetable. They are technological fixes to the fact that we don't know where stuff is, so it enables us to coincide in time and space with the vehicle that's going to take us to where we want to go. That constraint, which has been true for the whole of human existence, recently was released. I personally am now tracked wherever I go by this mobile phone, and so are you, and so are all the vehicles, and so are all the delivery vehicles, and so on and so on and so on. So we do know now where everything is. A constraint has been released. How much progress have we made, though, in imagining what the new possibilities are for living a better, more sustainable life, by the way, for perhaps reducing some of those inequalities? It's not just about more efficient, it's about different. And this is particularly relevant, I think, to the future of flight. So this third missing ingredient of imagination is particularly relevant to something like the Future of Flight program, which promises a fundamental new mode of travel, something that doesn't come along all that often. The critical challenge is, how do we integrate that into the existing absurdly complex transport system in a way that benefits? And there are a number of dimensions we can think along here. Obviously, the one that probably jumps to mind first is the economic dimension. It's quite likely, if we don't do something, that a novel zero carbon, low range, low noise, vertical takeoff mode of transport will come in at the very top of the market as an air taxi. And we could imagine it as a status symbol, couldn't we? And if I was trying to set up a business in this area, that's exactly the opportunity I might go for. And I might be looking for people to pay for this precisely because it's absurdly expensive to begin with, and have them use that as a status symbol. And in fact, I've actually seen business cases that suggest that one of the advantages of new forms of air transport could be to displace regional rail travel. Well, what a ecological disaster that would be, and what a disappointing outcome it would be if we allowed a new mode of transport to compete internally within the transport system with an existing pretty good mode of transport, instead of opening up new possibilities. There are also a whole set of technical angles that we need to think about here, like the safety case associated with having chunks of matter zooming around over our heads at very high occupancy rates is a bit worrying. And airspace management, low altitude airspace management, will be the critical determinant here. And trying to work out how we optimize this technology to fit into an existing network is an utterly non-trivial technical challenge in its own right. Perhaps the most difficult thing, though, is the management, or we might say it's regulatory dimension to this. Precisely how are we going to allow this to work? How will it integrate with other modes? This gets down to some quite gritty and potentially challenging questions. Where will we allow new airports to be built? What will they be like? How will we balance the benefits to society as a whole of this new technology versus the disbenefits that might flow to people who live nearby? Look, I think these are all great problems to have. As I say, it's not every day that a new mode comes along. And I think that with enough imagination, we can not only find a way to solve these problems, but perhaps also, quite importantly, we can do it in the UK in a way that will open up new economic opportunities, as well as new opportunities for the users of this for the UK first. That's great. I support it enthusiastically. I want, though, to emphasize perhaps the point I've been trying to make all the way along here, which is, tempting as it may be to get stuck into the technical or the economic challenges. The real challenge here is one of imagination. And we need to work out how to use these new possibilities in a way that helps put the complexity into the background. We need the managers and the engineers to manage this complexity. We can't make complexity go away. But wouldn't it be nice if we could use this as a simple new way that improved our lives and have someone else worry about all the detail about how to manage the horrible complexity in the background? So look, that's all I want to say at this point. No doubt many people will have lots of things to say about that. I look forward to discussing some questions.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much to Rona and Miranda. I think it was a fascinating presentation, very different in the tone and in the subject. And I could say I can take a couple of points from this very different presentation. One is the need of building trust. Miranda mentioned trust in the data, but with Rona presentation, I would say building breaking down cultural barriers, cultural silos, so building trust amongst the people that need to work together, not just alongside, because it's there where you can deal with complexity in a much more effective way. And another thing is that I gather from the presentation is the need to start thinking holistically, so thinking in systems, not just sector-specific focus, but rather connecting the dots between the challenges and the opportunity. So yeah, thank you very much for this insight. Now we move on into the Q&A section. We have about 20 minutes, so we got a few questions that are appearing in my Q&A box. I'm going to start with the first one for Miranda. Could Miranda explain a little about who does what in the National Digital Twin? It was mentioned in the recent integrated review. Is there a single lead on it in the government or academia or industry? Can you explain a little bit more how National Digital Twin works, or the leadership and governance of it?
Thank you very much, Luca. And thank you, Hannah, for the question. And it's an interesting question because obviously something like the National Digital Twin needs collaboration across many of those sectors. We're going to need the best in academics to progress data science in order to allow the most efficient connection of digital twins and digital assets. We need the commercial sector to adopt and find new business models, ways of ensuring and ways of transacting in sort of in the legal framework around digital twins, around the value of data and how if I take your data and add value to it, you know, what's an appropriate relationship there. And when we haven't got maturity in that spectrum either. And also there's certainly the argument has been made a number of times that government needs to have a role in the National Digital Twin programme so that it isn't subject to the demands of private sector shareholders, and also it can be managed for the public good. And certainly that is where the idea sort of first crystallised through a report published in 2017 by the National Infrastructure Commission called Data for the Public Good. And that is from where it has spawned. So the programme at the moment is hosted at the University of Cambridge and the Centre for Digital Built Britain. It is funded out of money from UKRI and Innovate UK. And so that's where it is at the moment. Oh, sorry, and the Construction Innovation Hub, because so much of the work around the efficiency of infrastructure at the moment is dominated in the debate around construction, though we at the National Digital Twin are trying to form that debate so that we're talking about the use and the services of infrastructure, not just its construction. So I hope that answers some of your question. Until very recently, the programme has been headed up by Mark Enzer, but he's moving to a slightly different role. So certainly if you talk to Mark Enzer, he will absolutely love to talk more about it.
Thank you, Miranda. I think you have answered the question, but we can always have a follow-up if that is the case. I will follow with another question, very different for Rona. You have described the importance of self and performance. So I would like to understand how you can develop strategy to maintain the gap between self and performance, and how this help with dealing with complex problems.
Yes, thank you, Luca. Well, I was listening to Miranda's answer, actually, and I was thinking to myself, one of the challenges is how you create an environment where there's true independence of thought, where there are no constraints, real or imagined, on what we can imagine and what we can come up with. And, you know, with these sorts of programs, if there was a single lead, for example, from industry, would there be too many constraints coming from the demands of shareholders? Even from academia, are there constraints that what you produce must be publishable, and therefore, you know, you find yourself channeling a certain level of thought down there? I guess I say all of that because in that sort of examination of self, that proper view of, well, who am I? What's important to me? What are my experiences that have formed that? What's my conditioning? What experiences have I had in my life that have conditioned me to think in certain ways that have led to perhaps a pattern that's producing certain types of performances from me? And really going under the skin of all of that to address and proactively choose your beliefs, to choose your conditioning, to make sure that if you are allowing yourself to be conditioned, that you've chosen that consciously. And that's a really, really hard piece. It's well below the surface. You've got behavior, then feelings, then beliefs, then conditioning. You know, we're deep down there, but this is the kind of stuff that could affect performance. I've gone off on a massive tangent, probably not answered your question, Luca, because I was wrapped up in thinking about what Miranda had said. But yeah.
I can ask again if you like.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, you wanted to know about strategies. So if you've done all that analysis of yourself, actually, the strategy piece to create the gap becomes much easier because you understand how to get the best out of yourself. So you understand if you are triggered into becoming sort of consumed by your performance, you can actually intellectually notice what's triggered you. That stomps on one of my beliefs. That's why I'm getting upset about it in my own head. Put that down. Everything's okay. You've done a good job. Carry on with the performance. And, you know, simple strategies do evolve just from the awareness and acknowledgement of who you are. And so that I know that's not that's more of a framework answer than a precise example, but me sharing my strategies as to how I do it doesn't actually help. It's not the kind of formula that you can copy from one human to another, sadly. Hence the reason so few humans really achieve sustainable high performance, because this mindset stuff's pretty hard going.
Thank you very much, Rona. I will move on with another question, again, very different for Paul. Centralized versus distributed system seems to be an open debate in autonomous, in UTM. Any thoughts from the speakers on where this will end up in the complex system of or unmanned aviation? We start with Paul, and then we might move on with Miranda as well.
So I think I can very definitely say both. Well, let's start with the really basic stuff. The fundamental resource we're talking about here, which is aerospace, is a limited public resource. And so at some level, there has to be a centralized, social decision about how that gets used and who gets to use it. So I think there's inevitably a layer of this answer that has to be centralized, has to be common, has to be consistent. But that we are imagining, are we not, a dramatic growth in the extent to which that aerospace gets used. At the moment, there are really quite a trivially small number of aircraft movements at high altitudes, and it's managed in a particular way. We're talking about potentially hundreds, thousands, and who knows, hundreds of thousands of air movements over shorter distances, and with with much more varied flight paths, aren't we? And so I think there has to be at the local level an amount of work that needs to be done. And the analogy I might draw is with the road network, which obviously we've got, hundreds of years of experience, but 100 years of experience of very high volumes of things. What we do is we manage at the high level through infrastructure and through capacity, but we manage at the local level through distributed control of traffic lights and roads, signage and signals and so on. So it's a very imperfect analogy, but I think the answer is not one nor t'other, but we need a layered architecture that recognises that different parts of the problem need to be addressed in different ways.
Miranda, would you like to come into this question as well?
Well, certainly, I don't want to contradict anything Paul says, because he always talks such great sense. I would offer...
There's a but coming, isn't there, Miranda?
No, not this time. I would offer that the other side to think about is, I don't know this flight world so well, but if I've thought about a bit about the connected autonomous vehicles space. I think we have a great opportunity with the increased processing power and availability of data to manage the fleet of connected vehicles in a way that isn't the same as the way that we have been forced to manage the unconnected fleet. And so that we are able to manage it as an infrastructure in itself, rather than facilitating it behaving in an uncoordinated way. So, for example, I'm thinking about where a sinkhole to open up on a road, we can take steps to manage the fleet, both in the system way that Paul talks about in the traffic lights, but we can also advise the vehicles to behave in a different way so as to avoid obvious hazards. And I think we've got to take the opportunity that new technology offers us to manage movements in a different way.
Paul, please come back.
I just wonder if I could come back on that. Miranda, of course you're right. And we've got to recognise that, as I said, the analogy I used was very, very imperfect. TRL's currently working on a trial of truck platooning, which is an interesting sort of halfway house. Again, we can only talk in analogies here. This is why we need imagination. But the current aviation airspace management regime is pretty much run like a railway, in the sense that there are corridors, and it's managed to absolutely maximize safety with the conscious and deliberate recognition that will impact capacity. The road system actually has a different level of priorities on it, and we need to have this debate about what are the appropriate priorities, what's the balance we need for this novel mode, given that we don't know what the intrinsic safety characteristics are, given that we don't know a lot of the basic data that we need to have. So, but in my imagination, I completely agree with you, and this is my point about having the engineers manage a lot of the complexity for us in the background. We would love to have this elegantly self-organizing system in the background, wouldn't we? That addresses the priorities we set at a national level for social or economic reasons, but then delegates all the micro decision making to some very clever computers. I'd love that to happen. Is that realistic? Don't know yet.
Thank you very much, Paul. Following on this, there is a question asking, is the digital thinking philosophy, and here I assume the digital twin thinking philosophy, based on a particular model, for example, system engineering language? Where does it come from?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Paul?
I'm not sure I do know. I think that the whole thinking behind the digital twin in the built environment builds on a heritage of thinking that actually has come out of the manufacturing industry. And Miranda mentioned the jet engine, which is often used as the test case. I think I'm absolutely sure there are many languages that are used, but I'm not in the technical depth on that. So yeah, whatever is being done by people who've got far more grasp of the technical detail than me.
In this case, we could say this is a very interesting question, difficult to answer.
It is a fascinating question.
It's a classic one. Rona, please.
Yes, just an observation. I find it fascinating. Some of the questions are about, is it this system or that system? Who owns it? Where did it come from? A lot of our questions are about everything up until now. And I'm fascinated by the discussion that I think Paul has promoted, and okay, but how do we figure this out? How do we work together? And Paul presented one view of what utopia would look like. Where are all the other views of what utopia would look like? And how shall we collaborate and combine all of this thinking? And I'm not sure if it's going to ever be a one or the other. The binary choice, I think we're past days of binary choices. So yeah, just an observation, and I'm sure there are others watching with more questions, but I find it interesting.
Thank you, Rona.
Sorry, Luca, can I come in with to back up Rona's point? I think if you're to the one or the other point, if you have to be really, really sure of your question to force a yes/no answer. And I think what all the greater amount of information in these increasingly complex systems will tell us is that if you're optimizing for cost, you might choose this particular set of interventions. If you're optimizing for your acceleration to net zero, you might choose a different set of interventions. And what will then be interesting is the delta between those two interventions to see what trade-offs you're making. And it is that is where I think we are heading with all of these discussions.
Absolutely. I've got another question that just came in. How do you see autonomous vehicle operating beyond a communication infrastructure, for example, in a rural environment, where central management might not be possible? Paul or Miranda? Paul.
Let me go first, and Miranda can amplify and correct my my attempt. Look,
the often the case.
So to some extent, it's a sort of technical engineering question, and I would observe that there are companies, and not Oxbotica's approach to autonomous vehicles on the ground. It is actually focused around the ability to operate where communications infrastructure might not be there. Other approaches assume that it's necessary for instance, map finding reasons to be in communication. My personal view is I don't think that a truly autonomous vehicle could exist if it were not able to operate in the absence of communication, because you can not only can you not, but you should not assume an external resource is automatically available for safety reasons. So there has to be some way for the vehicle to operate out of communications bandwidth, even if that operation is just to detect that the bandwidth has ceased and to go into some fail-safe mode where it immediately lands if it's an aerial vehicle, or parks if it's a ground vehicle. Having said that, that's the sort of quasi-engineering view. I would approach the question from the other end, and it goes back again, I think, to what I was saying before, which is let's ask the question instead: what do we want these things to do for us? And then that will determine what communication infrastructure we need to put in place. So it is certainly true that for example, mobile phone communications are patchy in rural areas. Actually, come to that, it's patchy in my bedroom, right? There's lots of places around the world where we can't be sure of a decent signal, but If you were designing a system that required that thing, then I'm pretty confident that a way could be found. And I think the military, for example, have systems available to them which are much more pervasively available, and that's because they cost a lot more. And they're designed for a specific purpose. So I think ways can be found if the need arises. The question is, what do we want? And if we see these, let's stick to aircraft for a moment. If we want drone delivery, but we think it should be paid for by the user, and only rich people who live in cities are willing to pay for it, then the problem doesn't arise. If we decide as a society, though, that actually air taxis is an enormous waste of this resource, and actually we should be doing air ambulances or air blood delivery, or I don't know what, some social purpose, and that's actually going to be more valuable in rural areas than in towns where a motorbike courier can get there pretty quickly anyway, then we might decide that we want to invest in the resources to do this. So I think you can answer the question from either end.
Thank you. It seems like a mission-driven approach would be more valuable, so a technology pull rather than push. Just one last question for a very quick answer before we take this event to close. And it is about, as for Rona, it's about the way we make decisions. Often we have a top-down decision, but I wonder whether you have example, have you worked with teams to develop a bottom-up strategy, which in our case works very well in collaborating business. So bottom-up strategy to have better outcome. What that process look like? We only have just over a minute for an answer.
Wow. The super quick version. Yeah, the super quick version then would be to take the time and effort as strategic leaders to define an ultra high definition view of what good looks like, of where you're trying to get to, and then you can open it up. Then it's easy. Then you just have to invite people to help get there. But if you can't be bothered to be really detailed about where you're trying to go, geez, that's dangerous to open that up. People start inventing, air drinks delivery, or maybe that's just me.
And that would be bad. Why?
Miranda, then I can tell.
All right. Thank you very much, Rona. I think we're just gonna stop here. We have 2 minutes to go, so I'm just gonna try to summarize some of the points which are extremely interesting, starting with the need of developing trust in data, which we didn't have much time to talk about, but also trust and break down those silos, data silos again, but also cultural silos to build a more effective, high performance team and collaboration. So I'm afraid we don't have any more time for further question, which is a shame. I'd like to thank all the speakers for their wonderful insight into the realm of complexity. If you would like to contact one of our speakers, their email should go on the chat box right now, so you can contact them to build your network, but also to ask for collaboration requests. I also would like to thank all of you that have posed question to this panel, and finally the Future Flight team at KTN and Innovate UK. Particularly, I'd like to single out Natasha Sim, which is the backbone of this session. Next month, there's not going to be any Future Flight webinar, but they will resume again in June. So stay in touch. You will receive information about it. With that, I'd like to thank everyone once again on behalf of the Future Flight team, and I wish you a great weekend. Bye-bye.